There probably isn't an angler alive who doesn't love a good fish story. It's always fun to relive those catches that stand out, even if we stretch the truth sometimes. These stories can serve another purpose, though. They can be great ways to learn and grow as an angler. You can analyze what worked, what didn't, and most importantly, what skills you need to continue to hone. This week on Untangled, we're taking a look at some of our most memorable catches from 2025 and the lessons those fish taught us. This is Untangled, fly fishing for everyone, presented by Ventures Fly Co. Hey everybody, welcome to it. This is Untangled, and I am your host, Spencer Durant. Can't believe it's the end of 2025 already. It almost snuck up on me in some ways. It has been an absolute whirlwind of a year. We've just been through so much this year, both at work and then, personally, it has been just nuts. But it has been really, really cool to get to interact with more y'all this year and to watch the VFC community just explode. That's really what it did this year. It has been so cool to see your stories and to be part of the journey with y'all as you learn to fly fish or you hone your skills. It's just been an honor to be along for the ride with that. And it's really cool that this is what I get to do every day when I wake up and go to work. And it's not possible without you guys, without y'all listening to the show and leaving comments and just supporting VFC. So I appreciate it a ton. The whole VFC team does as well. We're stoked because none of this happens without y'all. So we are very, very appreciative of everyone who has been part of this with us this year. And speaking of cool things going on next week, because next week will be 2026, we are dropping a second episode of Untangled every single week. So I'm pretty excited about that. It's going to start dropping on Mondays. So you'll have the extra episode on Mondays, and then the main show, just like what we're doing right now, will continue dropping on Wednesdays. And I am excited to see the reaction to what we're going to do with that show. I think y'all will enjoy it. Now, to end the year, I wanted to take a look back and reflect on those fish that really stood out to me and the lessons that we learned from them. So I've got a story about a fish I caught and the lesson I learned from it. And I snagged one from Alex. He wrote it down, so I'll read his thoughts on it. And then I also dropped a post in our Skool group asking for stories and lessons from the year. And there were tons on that. Tons of people submitted stuff. It was fantastic. I picked two that really stood out to me, and I'll share those as well. And if you don't know what Skool is, it's just our community where we hang out, talk fly fishing, we talk tie-in, we share stories, tips, and tricks. It's like Facebook, but it doesn't suck. No politics, no dumb memes from your Aunt Karen, just all fishing 100% of the time. So if you want to join Skool and get to have even more interaction and know more people in the community, there's a link to join it down in the show notes or right here on the screen if you're watching the video podcast. And let's start out with, I'll do my story, I'll share Alex's, and then the two from Skool. So this summer, Alex and I were up on this incredible river. It's about as wild as it gets up there. It feels like you're fishing in freaking Middle Earth when you go up there, right? Every time we go up there to fish, I keep expecting a hobbit to jump out of the bushes and steal all my food because they love food. That's why hobbits and I get along. So we all love food. It's a really, really cool place up there. And the fishing's usually always solid. There's been some days where it's just almost too easy and too good. But we have yet, knock on wood, we have yet to go up there and have just an awful day, at least together. I've had a couple of rough days up there by myself, but when Alex and I go together, it's usually just great. And this day that we were up there, it wasn't lights out. It was kind of slow. There was a storm blowing in, so it was a little overcast. It was kind of blustery. The fish we caught were nice, nothing to write home about. But there were stoneflies hatching, And we were just picking apart the water, fishing everything that looked good, trying to find some consistent fish. They weren't really all holding in the same type of water, and we'd find a nice seam and fish it and catch a bunch. Then we'd go to the next seam and there wouldn't be any fish. It was just one of those days where it wasn't lights out, but it was still really good. We were having a great time. And there's this one pool on the river that we've only ever fished above this pool, I think twice, maybe. No, we've only fished above it once because it's like 2.5 miles from the trailhead. And by the time we've hiked and fished and then filmed for 2.5 miles, when we get to this pool, we're usually out of time to keep going any further. We got to turn back because we don't want to hike out when it's pitch black, because there are a lot of grizzly bears up there. There's some, I don't know if there's wolves up there. I'd imagine there's wolves. Probably a couple Sasquatch. Wouldn't surprise me if they were hanging out up there. It's that kind of wild place. And then, there's the ring wraiths. You don't want to get caught up with them because Middle Earth, right? No, it's the kind of place you don't want to be hanging out after dark for too long. So we always end up hiking out. And I'm just dying to know what's around the corner from this pool, because I've only gone up there once and we were fishing it really quick because it was getting dark and a storm was blowing in. So we didn't really get to experience the water very much. So we're walking from one run up to that pool at the end, like I was talking about. And this river's kind of unique because it's a lot of water where it's kind of not great holding water. It's either really, really fast or really, really shallow. And then you'll run into one pool, a run, and a riffle, but it's short. So all the great habitat's concentrated into small pockets. So you end up fishing hard and then walking for a while, and then fishing hard and then walking for a while. And it's just the name of the game up here, the way this river is. And we were walking from this one run that we just finished fishing up to the final pool that we have only been above once. And all of a sudden, Alex starts losing his mind like he was at a Taylor Swift concert. He just starts jumping up and down and screaming. And I finally realized that he's screaming, "Bear, bear, bear." So I look up, and sure enough, about 100 yards upstream, there's a bear smack in the middle of the river, and it was just moving. It was hauling butt to get into the willows. I didn't get a good enough look at it to be able to tell what type of bear it was, but Alex, to this day, he insists that it was a grizzly bear. I don't know because I didn't get a good enough look at it. And it's kind of funny because I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before. I've spent a lot of time in Alaska. I spent almost a month on Kodiak Island one summer, and then cumulatively probably another 2 or 3 months at least just bumming around in Alaska. Seen a lot of cool wildlife up there. Have never seen a grizzly bear in all my time in Alaska. And then I moved out here to Wyoming, and there's grizzly bears in Wyoming, and I have never seen a grizzly bear in the wild, even though we're not too far from Yellowstone. There's a rancher last summer shot a grizzly bear like an hour and a half south of where I live. So there's grizzlies around. Just never run into them. I'm like the ultimate bear repellent, which is a good thing. I'm not complaining about it, but it kind of makes me wonder, like, okay, what's going on? Why don't the grizzlies like me? And I know what a grizzly looks like. I can tell them apart from black bears. There's a lot of black bears out here too. And I even had one come up and eat an elk carcass last year during the hunt. That's a whole other story. Point is, I don't think it was a grizzly because I never see him in the wild, but Alex swears to this day, "Oh, it was a grizzly. Well, 100% grizzly." So if you ever run into Alex, just ask him about that black bear that he saw. He'll laugh. So that bear, it was gone just like that because, again, we spooked it coming up the water. And we didn't hear or see a mama bear. The only thing I saw about this bear was it was small. It didn't look like it was full grown. It looked like it was a yearling, maybe a year old, maybe coming up on its second year. Definitely not big enough to be on its own yet, I don't think. But we sit there, we wait for mama bear, we start hollering, we're looking everywhere. No mama bear, nothing else comes out of the willows. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to fish that pool. I'm going to go explore. I'm sick and tired. If we're not going to go above the pool, at least I'm going to fish the pool. So I get up to it and I'm about to start fishing up towards the head of the pool where there's a lot more structure, there's a lot more current, and it just looks fishier. But I stopped right before I started making my cast, and I forced myself to fish the tail out where the pool shallows up, turns into a rapid, because I've got this habit of skipping the tail outs of pools. I don't know how I developed that or why, but it's something that I've been doing way too much of, and I've spooked a lot of nice fish out of tails of pools, especially this year. And I think it was my second or third drift through that tail out. Something hits my stonefly nymph that I had on as the dropper, and I set the hook on this just enormous cutthroat. It blasts out of the water like Free Willy running away from a great white shark. I start hollering. The fish lands in the water, takes off, and shoots downstream. And I'm running after it. But wading this river is like walking on greased up frozen turkeys. So it's taken everything I've got to not fall, slip, lose the fish. I end up getting out of the river and running on land after the fish, and my net on the back of my pack got caught on a willow, and I'm running, and I do one of those like cartoon stops where I'm like jerked back and freaking out, and my net retractor had stretched all the way out, and my net was keeping me, so I just shrugged my back off, and I just keep running after this fish. I have no idea how I didn't lose it, how it didn't pop off, but I got lucky, and I get this fish into calm water. I get it in the net. It's a beautiful cutthroat, probably about 19 inches or so. And we want to get a release shot of it because it was so colored up, just so beautiful. We wanted to document the fish, and it just slips right out of my hands before Alex can even get the camera focused and just slips on away. It was a little sad, but we ended up getting this great picture of it, pulled from some of the footage. Thanks to Alex, he did some sleuthing to find this. Now, the lesson from this fish, aside from learning that Alex doesn't know how to tell his bears apart because it was clearly a black bear and not a grizzly, don't skip the tails of pools. Fish love hanging out in the tails of pools, especially in the summer. I skip the tails, like I said, all too often. But you got to slow yourself down. You got to work all the water that's in front of you. Even if it doesn't look as fishy as someplace upstream and you really want to hit that spot upstream, fish what's in front of you, fish it well. Okay, if you move through water too quickly, you run the risk of spooking fish or missing out on really great ones entirely, like I almost did with that fish. So work the pools, especially the tailouts, pay attention to them, and it's going to pay dividends for you. So there's my lesson. Now, here's Alex's fish story. He said, one of my most memorable fish this year didn't come from a crazy fly change or a perfect first cast. It came from not giving up. I was on one of my favorite rivers, a big wild freestone, crystal clear post-runoff flows, huge gray drakes in the air, stoneflies crawling around. One of those days where everything just feels right. Spencer and I decided to hike into a section we'd never fished before. No trail, just wandering downstream. About 45 minutes later, I found a deep pool with a big down log and a really fishy-looking seam tight to the far bank. I rigged a dry dropper, a foam green drake up top, and a heavy nymph underneath. I fished that seam hard, every angle, every lane. 5 minutes went by and nothing, but something felt off. The dry wasn't floating right. The nymph kept getting pulled by the faster current. The water was swirling in weird directions. I'd already made a ton of casts and almost moved on. Instead, I clipped off the dropper and just went with a single dry fly. Same fly, just focused on a clean, drag-free drift. Second or third cast, a big brown shot up from the bottom of the hole like a torpedo and absolutely crushed the drake. The fight was a bit spicy. Deep water, fast current, logs everywhere. Somehow I got him in the net. A thick, golden, buttered up, drake-eating wild brown trout. Not my biggest fish of the year, but one that stuck with me. Why? Well, I stayed and I worked the water instead of bouncing to a new hole. And the fish ate the same fly I'd been fishing the whole time, only after the presentation was right. Even low-pressured freestone fish care more about the drift than pattern. And then as a little bonus, while we were taking all these pictures, which you'll see if you're watching the video podcast, a black bear popped his head out of the bushes right across from where I had been fishing like he wanted a snack. We yelled, "Hey, bear," and he bailed off, but see if you can spot the bear in this picture. And I love that story from Alex because I remember not just because of the bear that we saw. That was 2 days in a row we saw a bear, actually, because I think this was the day after that grizzly incident that wasn't a grizzly incident, but that's what we're going to refer to it as. But I remember I was running the camera for this. Alex is filming. He's really picking the water apart, doing a great job. And I was ready to move on too. We both were. I was getting the camera ready to go. And then he's like, "Oh, one more time." And it really was cool to just watch that persistence pay off. So glad that Alex shared that with us. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Now, we've got 2 stories from folks in Skool. And the first one comes from Phil Plunkard, who wrote in and said, "Every fish has been my favorite this year. Small or big, trout or bass. Each one came with a lesson and a deeper appreciation for how incredible fly fishing really is. 2025 was the first year I ever picked up a fly rod, and the biggest lesson I learned was simple. Just get out there. Try new things, experiment, be resourceful. And if you can't make it to a trout river or creek, go fish for bass, sunfish, or even carp. It's all part of the process. I learned how to set the hook fishing for sunfish. I learned how to strip set on carp. By the time I hit rivers and creeks for trout, I already had valuable experience under my belt. My most memorable fish this year was a largemouth I caught in late summer. I wanted to learn how to fish streamers and work on my casting and retrieves. I spent hours experimenting, fast retrieves, slow retrieves, changing things up and sticking with it. 4 hours in, I tried a low jigging retrieve and hooked into a 3-pound largemouth tucked under a tree. He absolutely smashed it. That moment, feeling the fish on the line and sliding it into the net, was the best feeling of the year. It built real confidence in a new skill and reminded me why I love this sport. I can't wait to learn more in 2026 and spend even more great time on the water." Phil, I love it, and this stood out to me because it ties into the theme of what Alex said as well, which is you've got to just get out there. You've got to spend the time on the water. And I love that you illustrated it so clearly. And we're honest too about how tough it can be to spend time on the water sometimes. And it's not all about trout either. We talk about that on this show a lot, where you can take everything we talk about for trout and most of it's going to apply to other things on a fly rod too. Put your flies in front of fish, make them look real. Really simple stuff that translates no matter what species you're catching. And I really appreciate the way you communicated that, Phil. Thank you. And then the last story for us from Skool is from Vince Morton, who wrote in and said, "Oh man, it's hard to isolate just one, so I'll share my clicking moment along this new journey. While trying to learn fly fishing through tangled lines, lost flies, knots slipping apart, snapped tippet, being stuck in trees, and setting early or setting way too early or too late, I was just coming up empty day after day, and the frustration was building. One day on the drive home, I was catching up on all the Untangled podcasts, and in one episode, Spencer reminded listeners, it's not just about catching fish, it's about slowing down, enjoying the moment, and being on the water and all the peace that comes with it. That hit me hard. The next morning, I went out, but this time with no pressure. I told myself, just enjoy it. I managed to fly to a bug I saw, tossed it out, and just let it ride. Not overthinking, no real thoughts at all. And wouldn't you know it, that was the day I finally landed 2 fish, a brown and a rainbow. They weren't monsters, but after the week I'd had, it felt incredible. My energy went from rock bottom and about to throw my rod into the river to sky high, just like that. Things lined up again. I was on cloud 9. I remembered I bought a fly tying kit and it was still unopened. So on the way home, I queued up another Untangled episode, and wouldn't you know it, this one was all about fly tying. Felt like fate. So I stopped by the fly shop, picked up what I needed for a zebra midge, and headed home since that looked like the easiest fly to tie. That up, I pulled up YouTube University, and there's Professor Alex from Ventures Fly Co. walking me through step by step on a zebra midge. Boom! I tied my very first fly. The very next morning, I tied that zebra midge on and hit the water, not even looking to see if it was something I should throw out there. The public water was a little busy that morning, so I took Spencer's advice and tried working the riffles since no one really wanted to be around them. I wasn't getting anything, and I was okay with that. I was ready to pack it up, but I threw my last cast that hit the seam beautifully, then boom, fish on. A gorgeous rainbow giving me a fight, jumping, showing off, all the anglers turning their heads to watch. I've definitely caught bigger fish before on private water with a guide, but this one was different. This one was mine on a fly I tied with my own hands. This fish wasn't just a catch, it was a true turning point. Easily one of the most rewarding moments in my short fly fishing journey. Thank you for the reminder to not let the frustration take away the joy. Don't overthink it. For me, those quiet mornings on the river before work aren't just about fishing now. They're about peace, learning, and connecting. Special shout out to Alex for the zebra midge tutorial. It worked like a charm. And thank you, Spencer, for the amazing podcast material and all the advice to slow down, enjoy the water, and keep at it. Vince, thank you. Very well told story. Thanks for walking us through that. And again, I love that you picked it that theme of you've got to keep at it. Don't let those frustrating days get you down because it's easy to do that. I talked about that on last week's show, how this year specifically, I have just dropped the ball on my expectations and on appreciating the river and on fishing as hard and as thoroughly as I should. It's just been a pretty crummy year from a fishing standpoint for me because I didn't give it my all. And you've got to do that when you're out there. And that's where you get the most out of it, I think. And I think, Vince, is what you're saying, where it's not the pressure of giving it your all, but it's the fact that you just go out there and just fish it. Don't worry about everything else. Just put your flies in front of fish, make them look real, and do the best job you possibly can. And then when you do that, you're going to get rewarded eventually. Just like Vince here was, just like Phil was with his bass, it's like Alex was that day on the river, just like I was for somehow not losing that cutthroat. So it all builds up. It all builds up to this moment of clarity where you realize, hey, things are working. This is how it's supposed to be. And it just clicks. So hopefully these stories serve as some good inspiration for everyone moving into 2026 as we set some new goals for what we want to do next year on the fly rod and everything we're hoping to accomplish. So appreciate everyone at Skool who commented on that post I dropped. Go read through all those stories. They're fantastic. You'll get some great inspiration from them. But with that, folks, we are going to wrap up the open of the show and jump right into the Q&A portion of this week's podcast. And for those who don't know, we spend every week here at Untangled with the last half of the show being all about answering questions from viewers and listeners just like yourself. So if you've got a fly fishing question that you would like answered, go ahead and send those on in. There is a link to do that down in the show notes or right here on the screen if you're watching the video podcast. Sean from Texas has our first question, writes in and says, "Howdy from Texas. I'm 25 and listen on Spotify on my way to work, but never flung a fly a day of my life. I want to get started, and I saw a 5X Cortland Fairplay combo set at my local Walmart for $100. Should I start with that or maybe take my money and go to my closest Bass Pro? I have much love for this podcast. We'll continue to support y'all through the episodes. Much love." Sean, this is a good question. While ago, I taught a guy using that exact combo once, and it's not awful for $100, but it's also not that great, being completely honest. The rod's pretty stiff. The reel and line are super cheap, and if you decide to get into fly fishing, it is not a setup that you'll want to use long term. Now, I say that, and I know there's folks out there who are immediately going to jump in the comments. Oh, well, I use my $100 rod all the time, or I use my... Wait, that's fine. But good gear is critical if you're really going to get into fly fishing. You want a rod that's designed to perform well, not just to hit a price point, which is what rods like that one that come in the combo kit you're talking about. So And anything at that low price point is built at the price point more than it is to actually be a good fly rod. Now, before people continue to get up in arms, note that I said good gear is critical. I didn't say expensive gear. I said good gear. Is a lot of good gear in fly fishing expensive? Yes. Unfortunately, you need a certain level of wealth, right? You need a net worth of at least $25 million to get into this sport. No, it's it's not that bad. I own a million fly rods, it feels like, and I love them. Most of them are very expensive rods, but I've also fished the fly flinger that we sell here at VFC. I fished it a ton this year, more than I ever have, and I would classify it as a good rod. It's not too heavy. It's not a super fast broomstick like you see in a lot of those kit rods are, where they're selling for like $100 or so. Those fast rods really aren't great for learning to cast because they're so stiff that you don't feel very much feedback from the casting process. So you don't learn what the rhythm of a good cast feels like. You don't learn what the fly line feels like as it loads and unloads during the casting process. And that's critical for if you want to really get into fly fishing and become a good angler, no matter what you're fishing for. You need to be able to know how to cast any fly rod, not just yours. And that comes from understanding fly casting mechanics and fly casting rhythm. So if you buy a rod that really doesn't let you experience that, you're just shortchanging yourself in the long run. You really will be done a disservice with rods like that. The fly flinger, it gives you plenty of feedback. You've got that feedback built into the blank. Fly flinger doesn't have top grade cork. It doesn't have a really fancy reel seat or this super glossy, crazy finish on it. It's built to cast well. It's going to cast a wide variety of flies. Something you're not worried to fish with. Something if it breaks, yeah, you're going to be bummed, but you're not out $1,000 or more. So personally, I would just save your money for a little bit and drop the cash on a fly flinger combo or one of our starter packs. It's a much better way to get into fly fishing, and you're getting gear that Alex and I both use the gear that we have for sale, and it's stuff we stand behind. We wouldn't be saying, here, use this if we didn't use it ourselves. And Alex is great at that. He fishes the ever-living snot out of the fly flinger. It's amazing what he's done with that rod. So again, I would shy away from going super, super cheap. And this is what I tell everybody. Get the stuff that's built not just to hit a price point, but it's built to actually perform well. Because that's what's going to make the biggest difference in your fly fishing. That doesn't mean you got to go drop $1,000 on a fly rod. You just don't want to get the stuff that's built to hit that super cheap price point. So hopefully that answers your question. I appreciate you sending it in. Todd from Canada has our next question, writes in and says, a good example of my problem was on a recent early fall day. I was fishing a grasshopper pattern up against the bulrushes on a lake. In a short period of time, I had 8 large tiger trout absolutely slam my fly. It was very exciting, but I missed 7 of those fish, landing only 1. I think my problem may be premature hook sets, but I'm not sure. So my questions are, 1, can you tell the difference between a hook set that is too soon or one that is too late? 2, does the speed of the hook set need to change depending on the size of the fish you are catching? And 3, any suggestions on how to improve my catch rate and have fewer missed hook sets? Thanks for any information you can provide and keep up the great work. Todd, thank you for the question. Very, very well laid out. I love it. Let's just go through these one by one here. Answer to number 1, hook sets that are too fast or too soon, telling the difference. Generally, a hook set that is too early is going to end up with you not feeling the fish on the line at all. Because usually hook sets that happen too soon, what's happening is you're yanking the fly out of the fish's mouth before the fish ever really has a chance to close their mouth around the fly. So you very often will not feel the fish at all if you set the hook too early. So if you ever hear somebody talk about, well, that fish rose to my fly and I set the hook, but I didn't sting him. that's what they're talking about. The hook never made contact with the fish. They didn't sting the fish with their fly hook. So generally, it's not hard and fast, but generally, if you don't feel anything, it's because the hook set was a bit too early. Now, hook sets that are too late, generally, again, you will feel a little bit of the fish. Now, the reasoning here is that the fish has your fly in its mouth, and there might even be a little bit of purchase from the hook in there. So when you go to set the hook, you're going to feel the fish. Even if it's just for a second, you might feel one head shake and then the hook pops free. But generally, when the hook set is a little too late, you're going to feel a little bit of the fish on the end of your line. But the fish, generally, you're going to feel a lot of the fly being spit out of its mouth. So if you watch a fish come up on your fly and it goes back below the water and you don't set until the fish sinks back under the water and you don't feel anything on your line, you were probably a little bit late. Now, this leads very well into your next question. The speed of the hook set has absolutely nothing to do with the size of the fish and everything to do with how that fish is behaving. Specifically, how quickly is that fish rising and eating flies off the surface. Sometimes your fish are going to rise, they're going to strike flies quickly. Smaller fish tend to do that a lot, but large trout will do it too, where they come up and they smack flies with a bigger, splashier motion on the surface. If the rise is quick and if it's splashy, you need to set the hook sooner because the fish is moving quicker, so you need to move quicker. If the fish is rising in this consistent feeding rhythm and you want to wait for the fish's head to go underwater, or if the fish is rising in this consistent feeding rhythm and you see it consistently eating and it's not a splashy rise, it's just coming up, just consistent, not fast, not slow, what you want to do is you want to wait until you see the fish come up, eat your fly, and start to go back underwater with your fly before you set the hook. You want to raise your rod firmly and drive that hook point home. If you watch the fish come up, open its mouth, and suck your fly in, you have to wait. You have to wait until that fish starts closing its mouth and starts going back underwater before setting the hook. Otherwise, you're going to yank the fly right out of the fish's mouth. And I learned this the hard way a few years ago. And by a few years ago, I mean almost 10 years ago now, on a tailwater with my buddy Ryan McCullough. And there were big brown trout rising to blue-winged olives. And Ryan's sticking fish left and right. I'm very impressed by it. I'm throwing my flies, and I cannot get a single fish to stay on no matter what I do. Very frustrated. So Ryan stops catching fish for a minute, comes and watches. It's like, dude, you're setting the hook way too soon. You got to let the fish go down with the fly. So my next cast, fly gets out there, it's floating. I see the fish come up, it eats it, and I force myself. It's like 1, 2, 3. The fish finally goes down with my fly, and I set the hook, and boom, put a beautiful brown trout in the net. So it's a tough thing to learn because your instinct is always just to set the hook very quickly. But when the fish are rising in that consistent rhythm or they're rising slowly, you've got to wait until they start going down before you go ahead and set the hook. And to your last question, about hook sets and getting a better hookup ratio. All too often, I'll see myself on video when we're watching back footage that we shot. And I saw this a ton with beginners too when I was guiding. I'll move my whole body for the hook set. Or sometimes I'll set the hook way too hard. Hook sets in fly fishing generally aren't this violent affair where you need to move your whole body or really yank on the rod. Really, you're just trying to drive that hook point home into the fish's mouth. You're not trying to yank the fish out of the water and transport it to another dimension. So hook set should just be firm but quick lifts of the rod with the line held tightly in your rod hand. So, grab that line against the cork, lift straight and firm, and boom. That hook set technique is really important to making sure that you're not missing too many fish. But if you're yanking, if you're pulling, if you're jerking, if you're twisting with your rod arm or your whole body during that hook set, What's actually going to happen, if you think about it for a minute, say the fish rises up to eat your dry fly, and on the hook set, you twist your body and pull with your arm to try and set the hook. Well, when you twist your body, you're dragging your fly rod and your line and your leader and your fly. You're dragging that all back towards you. So you're actually dragging that fly out of the fish's mouth before you've ever gone through the process of setting the hook. So a lot of times you'll just drag the fly right out of the fish's mouth and you'll think, well, what did I do wrong? Well, if you've got too much movement in your hook set, that's what you did wrong. Instead, if you just stay still, fish comes up and eats it, and you just lift the rod quickly and firmly, just a nice boom, just quick, firm lift, that really reduces the chances of you bungling the hook set. And I know, because that used to be one of my biggest problems, and it still is sometimes. I'll get excited and I'll twist, yank, and boom, flies right out of the fish. So pay attention to your hook set technique. Honestly, watch videos of other anglers fishing. Watch how they set the hook. The anglers who are setting the hook straight up, firm lift of the rod, or if they're setting it to the side, as long as they're not moving their body or really yanking their rod arms too much, that's the kind of hook set you want to emulate. So thank you for the really well-written, well-put-together question. Appreciate it. Mike from Oregon has our next question, writes in and says, in a recent streak of being skunked, I'm working more carefully on how I approach casting in places potentially holding trout. I know about working upstream to get behind them as well as a trout's cone of vision, but I'm in a bit of a dilemma with my casting angles. If I position myself so that I can cast upstream at a 45-degree angle and drift my fly, then I'm also likely to be in its vision from that side. But if I get further behind it and cast at a 60-degree angle, I risk putting my fly over the fish, or putting my fly line over the fish. Any help or advice is greatly appreciated. Mike, really great job in analyzing what you're doing and trying to figure out what you're doing wrong. That's the just best mindset to have. So tip my cap to you there. But in this case, I think you're suffering from something that we all ran into. I think you're overthinking this just a little bit too much. Okay, let me explain why. Yes, trout do have excellent vision. You mentioned their cone of vision. Generally it's accepted that fish see very well directly in front of them. They can see off to the sides pretty well because of where their eyes are positioned on their heads. And their real only blind spot is directly behind them. So when you're fishing, it pays to be fishing upstream behind the fish because that's where their biggest blind spot is going to be. But it's not ideal to sneak up behind every trout, make an upstream cast, and have everything work out. It's just not always like that. Sometimes you've got to go at a different angle to one side or the other because there's a branch behind you that you're going to snag on, or there's just the way the layout of the river works. You can't always be directly behind the fish. So a lot of times we're casting at those 45-degree angles upstream, just like you mentioned. So let me ask you this question then. If so many anglers are fishing at those 45-degree angles upstream, and if you've watched any of our How We Fish videos that we do here at Untangled, you're going to see Alex and I making these exact casts that you described. How are people catching fish if so many anglers are fishing that way? And for that matter, how are we catching fish if we're casting upstream towards trout and our fly lands maybe over where the fish is holding? How do we square all of this with what you brought up about trout's field of vision? Well, what it comes down to is, yes, trout have great vision, but they all have different levels of what they're comfortable with. It's more so the distance that you're casting from and a lot less the angle that matters when it comes to spooking fish, which is why I think you're overthinking this just a little bit. If you're super close to every fish that you're casting to, it will almost never matter how great your angle is. If you only get the fly over the fish, you being that close to the fish is going to spook them at some point. So what I like to do is I like to take as much room as possible and make the longest cast that I feel comfortable with because that's the best way to avoid spooking fish. So my first advice would be don't worry about your angles so much. Don't get caught up in making sure that you're exactly 45 degrees from where you want to be. Worry a lot more about whether you're too close to those fish. put some distance between yourself and the fish as much as the situation and your angling ability allows, because the closer you get, the more likely it is you're going to spook fish. And then make sure you're getting drag-free drifts. So work on distance, get some drag-free drifts. And if you've got to move a little bit closer to get that drag-free drift, that's fine. Okay, just keep an eye on the fish. And when they start to spook, when you see them dart away from you, you start to get a feel for how close you can get before they realize something's up. Because as wily as trout can be, they're not quite ninjas. They're not these all-knowing little water ninjas that are just going to scamper at the first sign of something wrong in the environment. They've all got a threshold for how much they'll tolerate. And we actually just talked about this in the last podcast episode 159, about spooking fish and how to know if you're spooking them and how to minimize spooking fish. So I'd go listen to that episode as well. So that would be my big advice, is don't worry about the angle so much. Worry about your distance and getting a drag-free drift. And then the last part of your question, you mentioned having fly line landing on trout and worrying about that spooking them, especially if you're fishing upstream. Well, landing fly line on trout really only affects whether they're going to eat, if they're eating dry flies or emergers high in the water column. Because fish eating nymphs down deep, down in the strike zone, they're generally not going to spook because your fly line lands on the water 5 feet above their heads or so. They might not even notice that your fly line landed there. Now, in crystal clear or really slow moving water, when the fly line lands on top of fish that are feeding down low, yes, they're going to see it. They're going to feel it. There's some vibrations and disturbance that's going to spook them. But if it's a faster run or riffle, that fly line landing on top of the water is not going to spook them. So 99% of the time, I'm going to say it's probably not going to matter unless you're in highly pressured rivers or you're in that super low, super clear water. So don't worry about that so much. Again, if they're up, they're eating dry flies, yes, you don't want to land your fly line on top of fish that are eating. At that point, you've got to land only your fly and as little leader and tippet as possible. But don't worry about your fly line landing on fish that are eating nymphs. That's not going to make a huge difference in your catch rate with them. So I appreciate that question. Mike, thanks a bunch for sending it in. And that's going to wrap up the Q&A portion of the show this week. And just like we do every single week here at Untangled, we are going to end with the live real life moment. Every week, we cap the show off with a story and picture from folks who are out on the water living real life. We love to see what y'all are up to, the fun fish you're getting into. We love being part of these stories with y'all. So if you've got a live real life moment that you would like to send into the show, there's a link to do that down in the show notes or right here on the screen if you're watching the video podcast. And this week's a live real life moment is from Brian, who writes in and says, I just wanted to take a moment to express my appreciation for VFC. I've fished on and off for most of my life, but recently I got into fly fishing. After discovering the masterclass for beginners, spending countless hours watching during bad weather, and finally pulling the trigger on the Weekend Warrior kit, there's been no looking back. You guys go above and beyond to explain everything in a way that anglers of all skill levels can learn from. I live in East Tennessee, and this picture was taken in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. After a long day with no bites, I spotted a winter stonefly crawling past my fly box. I checked my VFC flies, found one that matched in size and shape, and boom, landed a fish on the first cast. It shook off the line before I could reel it in, but the experience was incredible either way. I can't thank you guys enough for what you're doing. Cheers to tight lines, wings, and cold drinks. Brian, I love it. That real our right fly formula. Match the size, match the shape, match the color. It works in the real world. And it's so cool to get stories from folks who have that same experience. So I love it, man. Thank you so much for sending that in. And just to, let's end the show with a year-end thank you to everybody who sent in questions and live real life moments this year. Even if your question hasn't been read on the show, I read every single question that gets sent in here. I read every single one of them. So the stuff that y'all send in, whether it gets read on the show or not, informs what topics we discuss on the show. It helps me know what things are top of mind for you guys so that I can put together content that's going to help you the best. Without those questions coming in, the show would not be as good. So definitely know that I appreciate all the questions that come in. Even if it doesn't get read on the show, I've read every single one of them. And the same goes for the Live Real Life moments. They really give us, it completes the circle almost. We spend the show learning, we spend the show discussing, and then we end it with, hey, this is what it looks like when it's applied in real life. And that's really cool to see as well. We've got so many Live Real Life moments to dig through. We're just going to keep sharing them as much as we can. They are fantastic. We love hearing them. And, with that, folks, thanks for being along for the ride for 2025. I'm stoked to see what 2026 has in store for us. So until next week, when we get to chat again, go have some fun, get some fishing in if it ain't too cold. And until next time, live real life.